Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you.
Jean Marie said that I had chosen this book, and I did, but only because she had put several books. She did the research. She had already put some books down for possible series, and I have steadfastly avoided Elizabeth Gilbert. I never read Eat, Pray, Love, because by the time I got around to hearing about it, it was already a bestseller. And I don't know if you've got the ego that I have, but if it's already in the masses and they've already been reading it, how good could it be? I mean, how deep could it be? I mean, like, how original could it really be? I mean, I just really, I have excised out of my experience a lot of terrific books that I might have seen in a movie, and then I went back and read, and I go, well, I can see why this is really good. And I'm sure Eat, Pray, Love is probably one of those, but I've never read that one. And yet, this just jumped out at me, and I kept looking around it, trying to get a different choice, but it just got me. And I tell you what, she writes exactly the way I think. So I hate her. It's like I really do. So and I just really relate to her too. So I just wanted to come clean on that. You know, this was not this book chose us. So you're in it because of that reason. So last week we learned about fear. And this week, we're going to, now that we're free of your fear, now that you're all past your fear, we're going to move into enchantment. So Gilbert says that when she was hearing about a true story in the Amazon jungle, she suddenly had a strong feeling come over her, and this is how she describes it. She said, chills ran up my arms. Oh, they just did on me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood up for an instant, and I felt a little sick, a little dizzy, she said. I felt like I was falling in love, or had just heard alarming news, or was looking over a precipice at something beautiful and mesmerizing but dangerous. I can confidently call it by its name, she said. Inspiration. This is what it feels like when an idea comes to you. Idea of something. I get it in the pit of my stomach. I get almost like a little punch by spirit that goes, that's something to pay attention to. That's something to stop you in your tracks. That's something to think about. What if? What if? I prefer to call it it is inspiration. Of course, it's inspiration. Spirit comes up through you. I can also call that direct contact with truth, like something real, something true hits you, something you can feel in the pit of your stomach, or a direct hit on your heart. Maybe you feel it right here. Bam. Takes your breath out. She calls it the supernatural, the mystical, the inexplicable, the surreal, the divine, the transcendent, the otherworldly. Because the truth is, she says, I believe that creativity is a force of enchantment. I believe the creative process is both magical and magic. Can you feel that? Have you seen that happen in your life? She says, ideas are disembodied, energetic life form. Ideas have no material body, she says, but they do have consciousness. And they most certainly have will. Ideas are driven by a single, simple impulse to be made manifest. And the only way an idea can be made manifest in our world is through collaboration with a human partner. And so ideas are in search of a vessel that is willing to make the commitment to bring them into experience, into to fruition, into manifestation. Whatever it takes, whatever medium we need to use, whatever powers we have, whatever gifts we can apply. And she says, and the only way an idea can be made manifest is through the gifts of the human partner. So let go of the notion, this is me talking now, let go of the notion that ideas belong to the one they occur to. You know, I had that idea. Have you heard that? I had that idea once. They didn't really do it the way I would have done it, but, you know, I had that same idea. I thought of it. I did too. I had an idea for MTV, actually, in the late 70s when I saw Kate Bush blew me away on Saturday Night Live wearing a gold lame, skin-tight outfit, sitting on top of a grand piano and singing one of the songs that I had never heard before. And the way that she moved and the way that she danced, it was transfixing, transforming. I just couldn't believe it. And then a little bit later in the show, she had changed completely. She had on a big overcoat and a hat. And she was talking about rolling the ball, about how it was that her teachers, her mentors, had just fed her just like an adult rolls a ball to a baby. Just that's that she felt she had been so mentored by the wisdom and the amazing people that were there. And I thought to myself, oh my God, I was just blown away by both of those things. Got her album, had her albums, found, you know, I didn't even know where to find her. In those days, you know, guys, you couldn't Google things. You couldn't go and, you know, listen to musical tracks on your phone. You had to actually go to a record store that might possibly have it if they even knew, if they carried the kind of things you were interested in. And I thought to myself, you know what? That would be so cool if people just dressed up, had a set, and did a whole song, acting it all out just like she had done. And just did that over and over, just like, what if that was all, that instead of having just the sound, we could also watch them perform it? Wouldn't that be awesome? Yeah. Oh, well. You know, I don't have the skill to do that. Somebody did. It wasn't my idea, but obviously it was looking for a home because it needed to manifest in the 80s, didn't it? This is the late 70s. It needed to get going somewhere in somebody. So the whole idea here is that ideas themselves are already like, think of them as dynamic packets of information, a dynamic, and like she says, a consciousness that has a will, but it's looking for a partner. It's not being owned. It's not being consumed. It is partnering with you and looking for collaborators, someone to help make them happen or manifest. You can say no to them. You have free will, of course. You can say no, and they will go away, and they'll search for someone else to work with. But beware. Beware saying, I can't. Only because no matter whether you mean you don't have the time or the energy right now, or don't know how to begin, and you say, I can't. Because it's the same as saying no to them. The idea might bob around in the ether a little bit and try to entice you or call you, but will most often simply go to someone else who's ripe and ready, who says, yes, I could do that. If you really aren't sure, if you really don't know what to do next, instead say, wow, that's so exciting. How could I do that? If you ask how, however, you've opened up to the universe. Some ways could filter in Some ideas would come to you. Some people will come to you. Some helpers. Some book will fall at your feet. Something. Some call will come in. Something will come in your inbox. That's the way to stir up some magic, to begin to see how it could be possible. Keep that door open. She says if you do say yes to an idea, now it's showtime. Now your job becomes both simple and difficult. You have officially entered into a contract with inspiration, and you must try to see it through all the way to its impossible to predict outcome. She suggests to avoid the tragic, suffering artist route, though. Go the way that will give you greater joy and satisfaction than flaming out in cirrhosis of the liver, tragedy, or early demise. Just thinking about that. Just, give it a thought. She says, cooperate fully, humbly, and joyfully with inspiration. You can receive your ideas with respect and curiosity, not with drama or with dread. You can clear out whatever obstacles are preventing you from living your most creative life with the simple understanding that whatever is bad for you is probably also bad for your work. So, set about eliminating those things from your life. And if a project doesn't work out, you can always think of it as having been a worthwhile and constructive experiment. You can support other people in their creative efforts, acknowledging the truth that there's plenty of room for everyone. Battle your demons through therapy, recovery, prayer, humility, by realizing your demons were never the ones doing the work anyhow. You know that. You're neither a slave to inspiration nor its master, but something far more interesting. A partner. You can live a long life, making and doing really cool things the entire time. Did you hear that even when things don't work out, even when you apply yourself or you say yes and you carry it down the road a piece, but maybe it falls off, maybe it wasn't the right time, maybe things just never really came together, it just never really synced somehow. It's still an experience. You still learned some things. You still took it somewhere. You can still count that on your resume. Do you know what I mean? On your resume of life. I mean, you will use that. There is nothing you have ever learned in your life. I don't care how big of a waste you thought it was. I certainly knew what I was going for in college. I had a degree. I was going for a degree as a Bachelor of Science in Medical Technology that I was going to do for the rest of my life. And I was going to work in a medical laboratory for the rest of my life until I died. And I knew that at 18, for sure. So everything that was outside of that seemed like a waste of time to me. But I had to take some electives. I had to take some other things that weren't required, that weren't holding me there. So I took basic computer skills and I took basic management. And those were two important big things that ended up being important in my life. And I only took a semester of them, so I wasn't by any stretch of the imagination an expert at them. But that became the things that I used in my career and at the hospital. I only spent about 2 to 3 years actually on the bench in the laboratory. After that, my real calling, as I found, was to work with people, not with tubes, test tubes, and all of that. I didn't know myself. I didn't know who I was. I did know I was an imposter in the lab, though. I was afraid somebody would find out and throw me out of the lab. But the whole idea is that there is something in us that is wanting to be born, and nothing you ever do, even the things that don't come to fruition, they are not wasted or lost. So you did not waste your time. You lived. And it's so important for you to capture that and hold on to it and value it. and to feel how it is that you can move and learn more about how things can occur in the future. Ideas that come can also go away, especially if you aren't in a good place to act on them just then. Gilbert says to let them go gracefully and stay open to the other ideas. Stay alert, stay curious, ask questions, explore interesting things that might be suggested to you while waiting for that thrill of inspiration, the chills, the feeling in the pit of your stomach, something hitting you directly in the heart, the thrill of inspiration to strike again. Ideas that get away from us or the flame goes out often simply go somewhere else, to someone else. There's a story that she tells, and I'm going to read this a little bit to you, because I love the way she tells this story, how she met Ann Patchett, another writer. She said, she met Ann and formed a friendship. And she said, Ann, I realize we've only just met, but I have to tell you, you're extraordinary and I love you. Now, Ann Patchett is a woman who actually has boundaries, but she looked at me a bit askance, unsurprisingly. She seemed to be deciding something about me. And for a moment, I wasn't sure where I stood, but what she did next was wonderful. She cupped my face in her hands and kissed me. And then she pronounced, "And I love you, Liz Gilbert." And in that instant, a friendship was ignited. And later on, as they developed a friendship that went on for several months, where they weren't phone, they lived from a distance from each other, several states over. They did not like to talk on the phone. They weren't that great at texting or any other electronic. They wrote longhand letters to each other that you had to put a stamp on and send to each other. So it evolved over a few months' time. And she said, Ann told me that she was now deep into the writing of her new book, more than 100 pages in. And I said, okay, now, you really do have to tell me what your Amazon novel is about. I've been dying to know. So here's what had happened. This is what happened to Elizabeth first. She decided that the heroine of her new novel would be a middle-aged American woman named Evelyn. It's in the late 1960s, a time of great political and cultural upheaval, but Evelyn is living a quiet life, as she always has done, in central Minnesota. She's a spinster who's spent 25 years working capably as an executive secretary at a large Midwestern highway construction firm. And during that entire time, Evelyn has been quietly and hopelessly in love with her married boss, a kind, hard-working man who never sees Evelyn as anything but an efficient assistant. The boss has a son, a shady fella with big ambitions. The son hears about this giant highway project going on down in Brazil, persuades his father to put in a bid. The son uses his charm and coercion to convince the father to throw the family's entire fortune behind this enterprise. Soon enough, the son heads down to Brazil with a great deal of money and wild dreams of glory. Quickly, both the son and the money vanish. Bereft, the father dispatches Evelyn, his most trusted ambassador, to go to the Amazon to try to recover the missing young man and the missing cash. And out of a sense of duty and love, Evelyn heads to Brazil, at which point her orderly and unremarkable life is overturned as she enters into a world of chaos, lies and violence, drama and epiphanies follow. Oh, also it's a love story. And she decided she would call her novel Evelyn of the Amazon. But she got sidetracked by real life, she says. And 2 years went by. And by the time she had written yet another book that she was working on and completed it, when she turned back to all of the notes she had taken and all of the things, it was like holding a handful of ash. It just was gone. So when Anne told her that she had this idea for a story in Brazil, in the Amazon, that she needed to work on it a little bit, and she'd written about 100 pages in, this is when Elizabeth said, okay now, you really have to tell me, what is your Amazon novel about? I've been dying to know. So Anne says, you go first, since your book was first. You tell me what your Amazon jungle novel was about, the one that got away. I tried to summarize my ex-novel as concisely as possible. It's about this middle-aged spinster from Minnesota who's been quietly in love with her married boss for many years. He gets involved in a harebrained scheme down in the Amazon jungle. A bunch of money and a person go missing, and my character gets sent down there to solve things, at which point her quiet life is completely turned into chaos. Also, it's a love story. Anne stared at me from across the table for a long minute. And before I continue, she says, I must give you to understand that decidedly, unlike myself, Anne Patchett is a true lady. She has exquisite manners. There's nothing vulgar or coarse about her, which made it even more shocking when she finally spoke. You have got to be effing kidding me. Why? I asked. What's your novel about? She replied, it's about a spinster from Minnesota who's been quietly in love with her married boss for many years. He gets involved in a harebrained scheme down in the Amazon jungle. A bunch of money and a person go missing, and my character's sent down there to solve things, at which point her quiet life is completely turned into chaos. Also, it's a love story. Turns out those events had occurred around the same time. In fact, as they compared notes about when did you get that idea, when did it occur to you, how did you hear it, they came up with the idea that the idea must have been officially transmitted on the day they met. In fact, we think it was exchanged in the kiss. And that, my friends, is big magic. There are possible ways that Gilbert could have reacted to her friend stealing her idea. I mean, let's face it, folks, that's not a genre, you know. Well, let's see, any books on the Brazil jungle, you know, the one where you go down to and try to find out where a missing person is and a bunch of money goes away, you know, that one, that kind of genre. That's not it. That's a storyline. That's a specific narrative. She could have said Anne Patchett stole my idea, though she had no idea that what Gilbert's idea was, and they would likely have lost their friendship if she took it to heart and had gone to resentment, jealousy, blame. She could have turned anger on herself, blaming herself for losing an idea because she was a loser or lazy or stupid, that she would never be great, obviously. But she didn't fall for that trap. Or she could have put the hate on destiny. God loves Anne more than me. The finger of fortune's on her, not me. I'll never be good enough. Could have worried about that, but she didn't go there either. She says, instead, I chose to regard this event as having been a terrific little miracle. This was the closest I'd ever felt, she said, to sorcery. And I wasn't about to waste that amazing experience by playing small. I saw that ideas are alive. That ideas do seek the most available human collaborator. That ideas do have a conscious will. That ideas do move from soul to soul. And that ideas will always try to seek the swiftest and most efficient conduit to the earth, just as lightning does. Here's another example she gives, in case you think this is a little bit too prescriptive or too quirky, weird. Let's see if we get this right. That book was supposed to be mine. People in line growl, glaring at Elizabeth Gilbert when she's signing books. They will literally say that to her face. That idea was supposed to be mine. In some book event in Houston or Toronto or Dublin or Melbourne, the person says, I was definitely planning to write this book someday, and you wrote my life. She says, but what can I say? What do I know about that stranger's life? From my perspective, I found an unattended idea lying around, and I ran with it. While it's true that I got lucky with Eat, Pray, Love, without a doubt, I got exceedingly lucky, actually. It is also true that I worked on that book like a maniac. I spun myself like a dervish around that idea. Once it entered my consciousness, I didn't let it out of my sight for a moment. Not until the book was good and finished. So I got to keep that one. She says, here's one idea in 2006 I toyed with for a while, with the idea of writing a sprawling nonfiction history of Newark, New Jersey, and to call it Brick City. My notional idea and plan was to follow around Newark's charismatic new mayor, Cory Booker, and to write about his efforts to transform this fascinating but troubled town. A cool idea, but I didn't get around to it. To be honest, it seemed like a lot of work. And I had another book already brewing, so I never quite revved up enough juice to take it on. Then, 3 years later in 2009, the Sundance Channel produced and aired a sprawling documentary about the troubled history of Newark, New Jersey, and about Cory Booker's efforts to turn the town around. They called the show Brick City. My reaction upon hearing this was one of sheer relief. Hooray, she said, I don't have to tackle Newark. Someone else took on the assignment. You see, there are possible ways that things can happen in such a way that we really can't know how it is that these things are going to fall into place. She says, now if you're intrigued or perturbed by this seemingly out of the ordinary set of occurrences that Gilbert has matched her phenomenon up with. In other words, well, she's got two cases where that's pretty close, right? Two things that seem pretty unpredictable. But she has been doing some research on this, and she says what the world of science has called multiple discovery, which is when two or more scientists in different parts of the world come up with the same idea at the same time. Calculus, oxygen, black holes, the Mobius strip, whatever that is, the existence of the stratosphere, and the theory of evolution all had multiple discoverers. Check out the winners of Nobel Peace Prize in science, and you'll often find that they weren't actually collaborators, but working on the same idea at opposite ends of the earth at roughly the same time frame. Gilbert describes it this way. She says, when Janus Boyer invented non-Euclidean geometry, his father urged him to publish his findings immediately, before someone else landed on the same idea, saying, when the time is ripe for certain things, they appear at different places, in the manner of violets coming to light in early spring. It happens in the business world, in marketing, in every part of our creative life. Gilbert says, to me, multiple discovery just looks like inspiration hedging its bets, fiddling with the dials, working two channels at the same time. Inspiration is allowed to do that if it wants to. Inspiration is allowed to do whatever it wants to. We're lucky that inspiration talks to us at all. It's too much to ask that it also explain itself. In the end, you know, it's all just violets coming to light. So, what do you say? What do you say when inspiration visits you? Want some big magic in your life? Namaste.
Thank you for your inspired message, Reverend Karen. And for your honesty in sharing your response to the book. Just tickle me.
Oh, this has really been exciting. No, I feel like I've discovered a friend, a like-minded person. You know, yeah. I will not come up to her though and say you wrote my book.
Yeah, I love the way that you explained her understanding of ideas being like this dynamic energy. And it made me think of something, an experience that I had where I just had this idea that came to me and just wouldn't leave me alone, if it's okay for me to share. Yeah. I had this song that was going through my head because we were doing Wednesday Night Satsang, and I had this idea that there should be something at the end, not the peace song, but something that's ours. And this tune and these words kept coming in for this song, Namaste, I bow to you. And I was like, I don't write songs. What is this? Kept coming, it kept coming. And finally, like a couple of weeks with this thing playing in my mind again and again, I was like, well, I'll run it by David, because if he's heard it before, if I'm just pulling a song that I've heard before and throwing some words on it, he'll know, right? So I sang it into my phone and sent it to him. And he's like, oh, I'll transcribe it for you. And he put it into sheet music, and then we started doing it. And it was like so easy. And I was just amazed by that, how this idea landed. And I could have sent it away, but it was not leaving me alone. It's like, no, this is for you. This is for this service. So it's really cool that we get to do it all.
Isn't that the best? Yes, that's so cool. And you're so right. And it is easy to sing, but it's also, it really just puts a real, it surrounds us. It surrounds us, and it blesses us on the way out, I think. It's beautiful. Yeah. So glad you let yourself be used.
Yes. It's literally plopped in whole.
Yeah.
For the most part. I mean, David filled in the chords and everything.
It was an inspirational moment. It was beautiful. Did either of you read the book The 100th Monkey in the 80s? Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't know how valid the science is on that, but as a story, I really dig it. And I think that there's some resonance with what you've shared tonight, and actually in my own experience, my own observation on every level, and artistically, science, culturally, politically. And the idea is, I'm sure that many of you know this story, but let's just pretend the person next to you will benefit from hearing it, that there were two islands, and there were monkeys on both islands, and one monkey discovered that they were able to open a certain kind of shellfish or something on the beach using a tool. And that monkey taught another monkey, and taught another monkey, and pretty soon a critical mass, that's the term that I'm seeking to introduce here, a critical mass of them learned on the one island how to do this skill, and then the monkeys on the other island, who had had no contact with the original island, were all able to do it at the same time.
Wow. And
the idea is that there's a critical mass of consciousness that happens, that transfers. And it was very much in the vanguard when we were trying to end the Cold War. You know, that let us not forget that, you know, in our lifetimes, right, there was a period of time where we actually practiced duck and cover, you know, in our schools. And people were saying, you know, we don't need to do this anymore. And a critical mass of people thinking in a different way then manifest in a much more global acceptance of disarmament. Like, okay, nuclear weapons are not our future. And that was sort of the 100th monkey was sort of a tool for conveying that idea. Well, we see lots of evidence of that, not merely in that regard, but gay marriage. You know, like for years, well, first we were invisible, then we were made visible with AIDS, then we were marginalized, but a critical mass happened so that a conservative court said, it's okay, go ahead and get married. You know, and it's like, that had to happen. And you look at it in historical perspective, and it looks like, well, of course it had to happen. It was just inevitable as the sun comes up. But I tell you what, the day before it happened, it was not, I didn't appear to be inevitable. So I think that's what, I think that there's some mystery around the idea that ideas are just in the ether, and it's just looking for a vessel. But I also think that there's this thing of human consciousness that sort of provides a bed where that sort of thing can happen.
Like a zeitgeist.
Zeitgeist, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Well, thank you for taking it out of the personal or out of the individual and thinking of how it is as a collective that we could and do allow an idea to take shape in all of us, or enough of us.
Yes.
You know, enough of us can get the idea that we are ready for the next thing. We're ready to let go of that. We're ready to make that happen and to live more closely to our ideals, to our values, to the things that really matter, right? Yeah. Yes, I think that's a worthy prayer, and that alone is enough for us to consider keeping ourselves open to the hope and the trust that we speak the truth we know. Yeah. And as we do that, then truth will out every time, all the time. It's ready.
Yeah. I like the way that Eric Butterworth puts it, that there's an ever spiraling upward of consciousness, and we can make an argument that there isn't, or when we begin to notice how that is true, we can really be in awe.
Right.
Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.